Over the weekend, 70 tornadoes in 70 states, but what happened here in Joplin was certainly the worst. Just take a look at right around us. There are at least 6 cars mashed into a ball here with a chain link fence and building debris and trees all mashed in. Take a look in the door of this car. It's a Chevy, I think, but you can see a brick coming through the door, and then look at how the door is just riddled and punched all the way through with these holes. It looks like it was shot at by a machine gun, and anyone that was in that car wouldn't have survived.
St. John's Regional Medical Center, Joplin, Missouri. 5:43 p.m., Sunday, May 22, 2011. The windows explode inward. Not one, not two. Every single window in the emergency department gone, simultaneously, in one violent, deafening instant. The ceiling tears open, the roof lifts, equipment flies across the room. Patients still connected to IV lines are hurled from their beds. The lights die, backup power dies. The building, a full hospital, concrete and steel, built to withstand emergencies, begins to come apart. Dr. Kevin Kikta is somewhere inside it. He had taken cover 60 seconds earlier in a small office with a pregnant nurse. He pressed himself into a corner, hands over his head. He could hear the tornado, not like wind, not like rain, like a freight train and a bomb going off at the same time. Then silence. He emerged into a hallway that no longer looked like a hospital. It looked like a war zone. Patients were on the floor, bleeding, screaming, crawling. Debris was everywhere. Glass, insulation, metal, pieces of the building itself, piled on top of people who minutes ago had been lying in monitored beds receiving routine care. There were no lights, no monitors, no working equipment, no walls in some sections. And outside, through what used to be the exterior of the building, he could see the rest of Joplin, what was left of it. A mile-wide scar cut straight through the heart of the city. He had one thought: start moving. But to understand what Dr. Kikta walked into, and what the people of Joplin survived, we need to go back. Back 13 minutes. Back to the moment the sky turned green. Before we begin, if you're new here, this channel is built for one thing: stories that remind you what human beings are actually capable of when everything goes wrong. Not motivational speeches, not recycled news clips. Real people, real chaos, real courage. Hit subscribe right now, because once this story starts, you won't want to stop. May 22, 2011, 5:30 p.m. It was a Sunday evening in late May. Joplin is a mid-sized city in the southwest corner of Missouri, about 50,000 people, brick houses, wide roads, a hospital on the main strip, a Walmart, a Home Depot, a Pizza Hut, the kind of American city you've driven through 100 times without stopping. The high school graduation ceremony had ended just hours earlier. Parents were still in their best clothes. Students were still clutching their diplomas. The restaurants were full. The sky had been threatening all afternoon, thick, grey, restless. Storm warnings had been issued. Most people glanced at the clouds, kept their plans, and figured it would pass. Missouri gets storms. This is tornado country. You learn to read the sky, and most of the time, the sky doesn't follow through. This time it did. At approximately 5:34 p.m., a tornado touched down just west of Joplin, near the Kansas-Missouri border. Within seconds, it was clear this was not a normal tornado. It was an EF5, the highest rating on the enhanced Fujita scale, winds exceeding 200 miles per hour, a funnel cloud nearly 1 mile wide, the kind of storm that doesn't just damage buildings, it erases them, foundations, concrete slabs, trees stripped of every leaf and branch until they look like fence posts. It was moving east, directly toward the city. It had 13 minutes before it would reach St. John's Hospital. At 5:30 p.m., St. John's Regional Medical Center issued a Code Gray. Code Gray means incoming severe weather. Move patients away from windows. Prepare. Staff began pushing wheelchairs into hallways. Nurses unhooked monitors and moved the patients who could be moved. Dr. Kikta, who had been on shift since 4 p.m., helped guide his patients into interior corridors. At 5:42 p.m., a security guard sprinted down the hallway. "Take cover, we're about to get hit." Dr. Kikta ran with Sheila Cook, a pregnant registered nurse, into the only windowless space he could find, a small doctor's office in the ED. They had 60 seconds. The tornado hit the hospital at 5:43 p.m. What happened in those next 45 seconds has been described by everyone who lived through it the same way. It didn't feel like weather. It felt like the building was being attacked. Deliberately. Personally. The windows didn't break. They detonated. The roof didn't leak. It left. The walls didn't crack. Entire sections disappeared. Rod Pace, the med-flight manager who had stayed late to finish payroll, was on the second floor holding onto a set of glass doors. The doors had a 100-pound magnetic lock keeping them shut. The tornado pulled them open, with him still holding on. "It felt like the building was breathing," he said. And then, just as suddenly as it came, 45 seconds of complete annihilation. It was over. When Dr. Kevin Kikta stepped out of that small office, he made a choice that most people would not have made. He could have sat down. He could have frozen. He could have walked out of what remained of the building and tried to find safety. Instead, he started working. With no power, no functioning equipment, no proper supplies, no hospital around him. He moved through the debris-covered floors of St. John's and started treating whoever he found. A man in his early 20s was lying on the floor, gasping. He told Dr. Kikta, "I'm going to die." Dr. Kikta examined him quickly, found a large shard of glass embedded deep in the man's back, diagnosed a pneumothorax, a collapsed lung, filling the chest cavity with air, compressing the heart, making every breath a losing battle against time. He needed a chest tube, inserted immediately. There was no anesthetic, none. The supply room was gone. Dr. Kikta told the young man what he needed to do, without anything to dull the pain. The young man looked at him and said, "Go ahead." That is courage, not dramatic, not loud. Just a man on a broken hospital floor, nodding at a doctor in the dark, saying, "Do what you have to do." Dr. Kikta worked by feel and training. He inserted the tube, and then came the sound, a rush of air, sudden and loud, as the trapped pressure released and the lung re-inflated. The man could breathe again. Dr. Kikta moved to the next patient. An asthmatic in respiratory crisis. No nebulizer, no steroids, no power for any of the standard equipment. He intubated the patient using a flashlight he held in his mouth, biting down on it to keep both hands free. Then the next patient, then the next. While Dr. Kikta worked inside the broken shell of St. John's, the city outside was unrecognizable. The tornado had been on the ground for 22 miles. It had stayed that way for 38 minutes. In that time, it had destroyed more than 4,000 houses. It had damaged nearly 8,000 buildings. It had torn through a Walmart, a Home Depot, entire residential neighborhoods, a high school. And it had killed 158 people. But here is the part of this story that doesn't always make the news. For every person the tornado killed, dozens survived because of someone else's decision in the seconds before impact. Christopher Lucas was 27 years old, a Navy veteran. He managed the Pizza Hut on Range Line Road, right in the tornado's path. When the warning came, he didn't run. He gathered every customer and employee he could find and pushed them into the restaurant's walk-in freezer. More than a dozen people. He packed them in, kept them calm, and then left to find a rope to tie the door shut from the outside so the tornado couldn't rip it open. He never made it back. Christopher Lucas died outside that freezer door. The people inside it lived. Every single one of them. Don Lansor was 31, a former football player. He had just been out with his wife Bate, a simple evening, frozen yogurt, nothing remarkable. The tornado found them anyway. He covered her with his body. She survived, he didn't. These are not soldiers, not trained first responders, not people whose job description included dying for someone else. They were a restaurant manager and a man who wanted frozen yogurt with his wife. Within minutes of the tornado lifting, before any official emergency response could organize, before FEMA trucks arrived, before the National Guard deployed, the people of Joplin were already moving. Pickup trucks appeared at the ruins of St. John's. Strangers climbed out asking, "Who needs transport? How many can we take?" Dr. Kikta put a conscious, intubated patient, a man with a breathing tube in his throat, needing constant airway management, into the back of one of those trucks. He handed the driver, a layman with zero medical training, a bag valve mask, and spent 90 seconds explaining how to manually squeeze air into a patient's lungs. Then he watched that truck drive away into the wreckage of the city, trusting a complete stranger with a man's life. The stranger delivered him safely to Freeman Medical Center, the trauma hospital across the street that had sustained minimal damage and was still functioning. All over the city, the same thing was happening. People digging through rubble with bare hands, neighbors they'd never spoken to, pulling each other out of collapsed houses. A firefighter, arms covered in blood, carrying what he described as one really pissed-off cat. Because even in the middle of catastrophe, he stopped for a cat. Within hours, hundreds of volunteers had descended on Joplin from surrounding counties. Farmers with tractors, church groups with food, nurses who drove through the night from cities hours away. Here is the 30 seconds of science this story earns. The enhanced Fujita scale runs from EF0 to EF5, and EF5 is the top, winds above 200 miles per hour, enough force to strip the asphalt from a road, enough to pull a concrete foundation out of the ground, enough to turn a wooden house, every plank, every nail, into a missile cloud traveling at highway speed. The 2011 Joplin tornado was on the ground for 38 minutes and traveled 22 miles. That is not common. Most violent tornadoes touch down briefly and lift. This one stayed. It carved a consistent path nearly a mile wide through a populated city in the middle of a Sunday evening. The meteorological conditions that created it, warm, moist air from the Gulf of Mexico colliding with cold, dry air from the Rockies over the flat plains of mid-America, are the same conditions that have threatened this corridor every spring for centuries. Tornado Alley doesn't move. The storms come back. What changes is whether people are ready, whether buildings are built to code, whether the 13 minutes of warning between touchdown and impact are used to run or ignored. 13 minutes. That's all the gap between a tornado's birth and your front door. Some people in Joplin got the warning, some didn't. Some heard it and didn't believe it. The difference between many of the survivors and the victims came down to those 13 minutes and one decision. The final death toll, 158 people. More than 1,150 injured. $2.8 billion in damage, one of the costliest natural disasters in Missouri history. St. John's Regional Medical Center, the hospital that had stood for decades at the center of the city, was a total loss, condemned, demolished. But within days of the tornado, a field hospital was operating in its place. Within months, a temporary facility was running. Within years, a brand new Mercy hospital had been built, stronger, better, purpose-designed for exactly this kind of event. Dr. Kikta went back to New Jersey. He wrote about what happened, a first-hand account published in the Missouri State Medical Association Journal. He wrote it not for recognition, but because he wanted other emergency physicians to understand something fundamental. You will never know that it is the most important day of your life until the day is over. Christopher Lucas got a street named after him, a memorial, a legacy that stretches far beyond a Pizza Hut on Range Line Road. The people he pushed into that freezer are still alive. The city was warned by federal officials to expect to lose 25% of its population after the tornado. People don't come back from that kind of loss, they said. Cities shrink, communities fracture. Joplin built an average of 5 new houses a week for the next decade. More than 300 new businesses opened in the 5 years after the storm. The high school that was partially destroyed, it reopened. President Obama delivered its commencement address the following year. Joplin didn't just rebuild. It decided, loudly, collectively, defiantly, that the tornado was not the final word on who they were. That's not a PR statement, that's what happened. Courage in Joplin on May 22, 2011 did not look like a movie. It looked like a doctor biting down on a flashlight. It looked like a young man nodding in the dark. It looked like a Navy veteran walking back into the storm to find a rope. It looked like a farmer showing up with a truck, no instructions, just the instinct that someone needed help getting somewhere. The tornado lasted 38 minutes. The courage it revealed has lasted longer. That is what extreme weather does when it is at its worst. It strips everything away. The houses, the hospitals, the infrastructure, the distance between strangers. And sometimes, in the wreckage, it shows you exactly who people are. In Joplin, that turned out to be something worth documenting. 158 people died in Joplin that day. But thousands survived because of doctors who worked in the dark, strangers who showed up with trucks, a Navy veteran who chose a door over safety. Stories like this one don't go viral on their own. They need you to share them. If this episode moved you, send it to someone, post it, drop it in a group chat. These stories deserve to travel further than an algorithm will carry them. And before you leave, the comment section is open. Tell us who in this story hit you hardest. Dr. Kikta, Christopher Lucas, the young man who said go ahead without anesthetic, or was it the strangers in the pickup trucks? Let's talk about it below. Subscribe so you're here for the next one, because the next story is already coming and it will hit just as hard. See you there.